are pleased to be joined by many different members of Everybody, a play being performed at the Hillberry Theater on the campus of Wayne State University. Cheryl Turski joins us, as well as Alexander Durden, Julia Luderman, and lastly, Laresha Dion joins us on the MegaCast. Now, to talk about this play, let's start with you, Cheryl. Tell us a little bit about the play. Just give us an overview, a summary of what the story is that people will see performed at the Hillberry Theater.
So it's based on this really old play from the 15th century called Everyman. And I know that sounds boring, but it's a contemporary adaptation of that, in which this character, Everyman, or in our case, Everybody, is faced with their own mortality, their own death. And they're sort of going on this journey of sort of accepting their own death. And it's a comedy. So I know that sounds really dark, but the adaptation, which is by Branden Jacobs-Jenkins, he put a lot of levity in it as well. So it's, yes, you're like struggling with these existential questions, but he makes it really fun and enjoyable and entertaining at the same time. That's, I think, the best way to describe it.
So Laresha and Alexander, they both play characters known as simply just somebody, and then Julia, you're playing a character known as Time. What, Cheryl, is the purpose behind the character names in this case? Both Laresha and Alexander's being somebody, and then others being Time. Are the characters not being represented as individuals and more just concepts in this play?
Yeah, great question, and yes. And also the really fun thing is we have 3 other somebodies. So there's 5 somebodies, and every night they draw a ping pong ball to decide who they will be playing. So they've basically memorized the entire script. They play a different role every single night. Julia is wonderful and plays the same part, but the other 5, we have 5 somebodies, and they play different parts. So yes, they're sort of these, they can be friendship or family, or they can be various sort of things that are in our lives.
So
that's fun.
Yes, yeah, that's a really interesting concept. And so I want to ask, and let's just go left to right from my point of view here. Laresha, let's start with you playing a different somebody every single time, just drawing from a hat or drawing straws or whatever the case may be to choose which somebody you're playing. How does that affect the way that you approach your performance and your preparation for each one of these shows, not knowing which character you're going to play and having to kind of know several different characters and all the different ways that they're interacting with the storyline as it develops and with the other characters?
Yeah, so this is the first theatrical experience that I've done in this way. And our acting teacher told us a story that ended with a quote, "bird by bird," which is basically to just take it one fragment at a time. And so I really just, in rehearsal, we were up in different rotations on our feet, watching each of our other somebodies do the blocking and then taking those notes. So that part was familiar to me, having been a swing before, because when you're an understudy or a swing, you're doing the same thing. You're observing the blocking and then taking notes. But the process that was different this time around was, instead of just memorizing the gist or the cue lines of my scene partners, you're memorizing the entirety of the scene, which was incredibly daunting. However, in performance, actually makes it so much easier, because you really understand so much more of the beats and nuances and moments between the characters than you might if you're playing it from a singular role, where like you understand what your scene partner's going through, but like you're still in your shoes. When we're like, if X is everybody and I'm friendship, we both understand what it's like to be on the other side of the conversation. So I've been really enjoying how much freedom there is in knowing the story that well. But the rehearsal process it was like the opposite, where you're like, oh gosh, like this is kind of crazy. And we have all borrowed each other's choices and sort of built our individual interpretations of these characters based on what our scene partners are doing, which I think is really beautiful.
And X, let's give you a similar question to that. Does having knowledge of each one of those somebodies that you may or may not be playing on any given night, does that give you a different kind of approach to your performance, because you're able to go into each performance, no matter which one of those somebodies you're playing, with the knowledge of the other somebodies and their experiences, and being able to tailor that maybe even to your character as your somebody on one given night is interacting with others?
I think Larisha said it best in that we have the experience of being on the other side of that. But I also think that it gave us the opportunity to explore things that were not being so far explored. We got to see a wide range of interpretations on many of these different characters. And so that gave us the kind of tools, the kind of vocabulary to be able to go beyond that and try something completely different that may or may not work, because we knew that the person who was receiving the choices that we were making understood where we were coming from and could, reflect their responses directly back to us. So yeah, it definitely helped. And I think that even when we are backstage, we always seem to know exactly where we are in the piece, which is really, really nice. And so it's both functional on stage and backstage.
We're joined by a number of performers and a director of Everybody, a play that will be performed at the Hillberry Theater on the campus of Wayne State University in Detroit, that is currently ongoing on Fridays and Saturdays from 8 p.m. to 11 p.m. That continues through this Saturday, October 16th. Learn more information by calling 313-577-3010. Again, that's 313-577-3010, or you can send an email to theater, theatrepr, at wayne.edu. theaterpr@wayne.edu. The ticket prices for the show range from $15 to $22. And so, Julia, similarly to the questions that I asked to Larisha and to X, being that you are playing the same character every night, but you're interacting with different people playing different characters, they're all going to have their own interpretation of one somebody versus the next, of one character versus another. And so every performance, your interactions as time are going to be different with one similar character than it will be with that same character in another performance. How does that affect the way that you go about preparing for your one character, knowing that your one character is going to remain the same, but everything else around you in terms of the other performances, in terms of the other characters, is going to be at least somewhat different each time you hit the stage?
Yes. So it's nice that the skeleton is there with the lines. The lines are always going to be the same, but it keeps it super fresh every night, and being able to make a real authentic acting choice and really reacting, because I don't know what to expect. I'm not waiting for like a cue or a line that I've heard a bunch. It'll be different every night, and it's cool to do that.
We're joined by a number of different people from Everybody, a performance of a stage play at the Hillberry Theater on the campus of Wayne State University in downtown Detroit. That is going on Fridays and Saturdays now through this week, Saturday, its final show on October 16th from 8 p.m. until 11 p.m. And you'll be able to learn more information by calling 313-577-3010. And Cheryl, as a director of this play, and being someone that is leading the performance here, and being that it is such a uniquely crafted show, both in its approach to storytelling, but also in the way that you're approaching having your actors perform each of these characters on a given night, being that they're randomly selecting, in the case of the somebodies, a number of different characters. What kind of what educational elements does that bring to the actors to be able to give them this opportunity almost at random to have to be prepared for whatever may come to them on a given night in terms of their performance, and be ready for so many different facets of what this play may bring to them individually, and then how that ultimately impacts the play itself.
I'm a really big fan of freedom within really defined structures. And so one of the things that this play really sort of awards us is a very defined structure, right? So even though there is this lottery, we do have the lines, we sort of know what the play looks like. But within that, you could be playing all these different things on any given night. And I tried to make the rehearsal process sort of equally as structured, right? So like very concrete things that we'd be working on any given day. And what's fun about that is the last year was so chaotic that being able to do something that provided a really strict structure like that, I believe really helps students, and specifically student actors, try to find their own artistic freedom, because they know that there are not limits, that's not the right word, but there's a really nice world and foundation that they can live in and play in, as defined by the playwright and my rehearsal schedule. And then, so they don't have to have the same kind of maybe anxiety that might come from like, who knows, team, like we could be shut down on any day, which is what the pandemic was like for theater artists. Was you would plan something and then 2 days later a health committee would shut you down, right? So, I'm not blaming the health committee. Yeah. It was because of other things, but it was really challenging. And so it was really pretty astounding to be in this process, to know we were going to be in person, to know we were going to be on stage, and to know that we at least had something to do, if that makes sense.
And if I could add on to that, I think that Cheryl is absolutely correct. And this gave the actors a lot of opportunity to really create defined characters, which is something that as a professional actor you have to do. It's just that usually you get 1 or 2 that you have to do in a play. Whereas with this, on any given night, we're playing 4 or 5 different roles. And that's just for one actor. And you have to make those super defined and very much different than the other characters that you play, so that the audience doesn't interpret it as the same person. So I think that that's something that is really, really useful outside of this process that we really got to investigate and get acquainted with over the last couple months.
We're joined by a number of different people involved in the stage play Everybody, which will be performed, and it's currently being performed at the Hillberry Theater on the campus of Wayne State University. They're doing performances on Fridays and Saturdays from 8 p.m. until 11 p.m. This Saturday, October 16th, is the final edition of that program. And for the actors, and we'll start with Julia. How has it been getting back out into the actual theater on an actual stage, interacting with other actors and your director in person as you're preparing for Everybody after so much time of stop and start or virtual performance or no performance at all?
I have to say, this is, I think, the first time I've even been on a Zoom call since being back in person. And I'm very excited about that. Every time the show is over and I get up there for the bow, and I'm smiling just as big as the first night. I don't think there are words to describe how the transfer of energy matters so much to theater artists and actors, and to have that back has been incredible. And then
Laresha, you as well.
Yeah, I think, if there's not a silver lining, but if there's anything positive that I took away from the pandemic, it was really getting in touch with my yeses and my nos. And I think as theater artists, we operate in a world where we are really connected to our impulses. And so I feel like being back on stage for the first time in, for me, almost 2 years, those impulses feel so much stronger, right? Because I've had to move through the world differently, as we all have. And so I'm so much more aware of my scene partners and myself and what feels good and And that is kind of like a beautiful gift that came out of this pandemic. I think it's what we strive for as artists is to really be in touch with our impulses. And so I love when it's something that you love is taken away, it feels like Julia said, it's like the first time every time. And there's something really beautiful about just being so aware of how precious the gift of being in space together is. And I feel that in the audience too. I very much feel like our audiences have been like we're breathing together again, you know, even though we're masked, right?
Yeah.
That you can feel and you can see the shoulders lift in the audience as you're moving through these, or you hearing the laughter is just, it's not something I will ever take for granted again.
And then lastly, X.
Yeah, I don't know how to follow up what these wonderful women, these wonderful actors said. They kind of covered it all. I think that the thing that distinguishes live theater is that it is something that happens once and in an instant it's done. And you can do a show, the exact same show for 50 years straight, and every performance will be different. And that's something that I've missed over the course of the pandemic. With virtual performances and recorded performances, we became much of the same kind of structure as television and film. But that sharing of energy, as Julia said, is what really makes the theater special. And so to have that back, to be able to raise an eyebrow and hear an audible response is something incredible. And it's what's drawn me to the theater in the first place. And I'm just very, very elated to be back.
We appreciate the four of you coming on, giving us your insight on preparing for this show and telling us a little bit about the show as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.